Welcome to Four Favorites, brought to you by the Quiet on Set podcast. I'm your host, Ewan, and today we got returning guest Zach Shevich back on from the Intercut podcast. So welcome back, Zach.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure and an honor.
Yeah, we'll always invite you back for these, for the Four Favorites. Now, this month, we're not talking about horror anymore. We moved over for December. We're talking about animation. So without further ado, let's just get straight into it. You know the drill. We're talking about four of your favorites, but we also want to hear about some films that just narrowly didn't make the cut to come onto your final list.
Yeah, and obviously there are so many animated films to choose from because, I think that's the constant debate when you're talking about animation is animation even a genre, or is that just like a type of film, right? So you could have all sorts of different types of films. I tried not to have too many Pixar movies in my top four. I failed at that, but I did try. And because I tried, I did not include Wall-E, which is another one of my favorites from the Pixar gang. I really love Up as well. But yeah, they are not the best movies that Pixar has made, in my opinion. So I left them out of the top four. Just thinking about some of the animated films that I loved from this year, because there's two that I thought were quite special. One of them being Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. I don't think I'm going to be the only one who brings that up as like a great piece of animated movie. I mean, I guess there's sort of a question as to how much of that movie is actually animated rather than just stop motion animated. But still, it's just got like this gigantic heart to it that I love. And the other movie that I put on here has a gigantic heart as well. It's the Bob's Burgers movie. I'm a fan of the TV show, so I'm a bit of a sucker for it. But I do think that the movie has this really special warmth to it and this kind of radical acceptance that I think is really cool about the show and the movie in general. So I got the Bob's Burgers movie on my list as well. And I'll throw one more honorable mention out there for my guy Wes Anderson and Fantastic Mr. Fox. Just the best depiction of like storybook I've seen in an animated movie. It feels like turning the pages of a children's novel, and it's so precious and perfect, and maybe like almost like a little too perfect for this world. I love Fantastic Mr. Fox a lot, even though I did not put it into that final four.
Yeah, I mean, I'm keen for your list now. Lots of great honorable mentions to kick it off. You said that some Pixar films did make the cut. By the way, Wall-E is also the official Quiet on Set best Pixar film that we crowned the best one once we did a bracket for that one.
Nice.
In our episode 100. You said there's more than one Pixar film on your list.
Yeah.
With which one do you want to kick it off?
I'll kick it off with the one that to me is Pixar's most like special film in terms of just the story it's trying to tell and something that really resonated with me. I really love Ratatouille from director Brad Bird. Of course, the story of Remy the rat who dreams of becoming a great French chef. And it's another one of Pixar's great, like, this thing shouldn't be doing this thing, a rat in the kitchen. How can it happen? And I think it really ends up pulling on these amazing threads of who should be and can be someone who does something great, right? Like the whole Anton ego speech towards the end about anyone can cook is just one of the most beautiful pieces of writing and film, and that it comes in this piece of children's film is so warming and wonderful. It's also just so delightful in its imagination and its use of space. I love how they're able to really give you like a different perspective by making you on the level with Remy as he tries to navigate what are these like labyrinthian gigantic kitchens to a rat, but ordinary to us. I don't know. There's just all these elements to it that I love. I still, anytime that I'm shopping for bread, think about that moment when when she says that you can tell good bread not by the taste or by the smell, but by the sound the crust makes. I don't know, it's just full of gems like that. So I really, really love Ratatouille.
Yeah, I feel like for that generation that kind of grew up with that film, the chef meme of like, he likes it, he enjoys the simple
Yeah,
thing that he cooked. It's something that is really iconic that goes beyond the film as well. Just
totally.
an iconic film from Pixar in the great time of not been as strong as of late. I think we can kind of
Yeah,
agree on that, but
unfortunately.
still going strong with the franchises. Though maybe we don't like some of the sequels, but Zach, you got one of the sequels from
Yeah.
Pixar on your list.
What I would argue is their best sequel, Toy Story 3. And yeah, I am conditioned to believe that as somebody who was around college age when this movie came out. I
Hmm.
like Andy, my growth is charted through the different Toy Story films, and
Hmm.
that whole idea of moving on and finding like a new chapter in life. It just obviously would resonate with you at that certain age, but I also think it's just handled so deftly and so
Hmm.
gracefully that there's a beauty in it. I also just think that a film that is able to get you to the point where a bunch of toys are holding hands as they're approaching this incinerator, and part of you is like, it's okay if they die because they're gonna die together.
Yeah.
To get you to think that is quite masterful filmmaking, kids film
Yeah.
or not. So I still just remember that feeling in the theater of being totally enraptured by that moment and
Mm.
feeling for them. And I don't know, it's probably the most emotional that any of these animated films made me.
Yeah, as you grow up with the films, they tell that kind of perfect story as you
Yeah,
age with the film as well. Great pick from you. I agree with you there. Some of the best Pixar. Now we are going into shifting gears, going into a
definitely.
completely different direction.
And
Are
this
we
one's
going
not
to?
for kids.
Is it though? No, definitely not. Definitely don't show this to your
No.
kid. Mostly will be confused,
Yeah.
most likely. I don't know what else would the emotion be, but I think that goes for every Charlie Kaufman film. We are talking about his 2015 film Anomalisa, the claymation stop motion film, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Uh, with David Fellis and probably I don't know how to correctly say his name, and Jennifer
Clueless.
Jason Leigh. What makes Anomalisa worth a spot on your top four favorites?
Anomalisa is a film that I had a lot of hype for before it came out, and
Hmm.
because it is, the rare film from Charlie Kaufman, who has only
Yeah,
made, uh, I think it's directed at least three films in the last
yeah,
20 years or so. So it is a
hmm,
treat when we get one of these things, but it is so small and so intimate and so observant of minutia in some ways that it's very easy to kind of overlook the existential horror and beauty that he's
hmm,
kind of putting on display in this movie. Uh, David Thewlis voices a man who is in a new town. He's a guy who travels a lot, spends a lot of time in hotels, and he clearly is this kind of like miserably lonely guy
hmm,
who um, eventually meets Jennifer Jason Leigh's character, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is just this brightness to him, and that is
yeah,
also partially represented by what I think is a really brilliant move in that every single person in the film who is not voiced by David Thewlis or Jennifer Jason Leigh is voiced by Tom Noonan. So men,
hmm,
women, cab drivers, young children, they all have this very kind of like bland man's voice, and
hmm,
then from that sea of dreariness emerges a Jennifer Jason Leigh who just makes his life feel full of wonder again. And I think
yeah,
it really is just this amazing representation of what finding somebody special can do and can feel like. It's so
hmm,
hard to communicate the feeling of like being in love or falling in love in film, and they
hmm,
found this kind of ingenious way to represent it that works both is like high comedy and low comedy. Getting in like a sort of tangent animation recommendation. It's not a movie, but my favorite animated show is BoJack Horseman. And one of the things I
hmm,
love about that is they will do these jokes that are broadly silly and just kind of ridiculous in how hilarious they are. But also when you like dive into them and think about it, there is a profundity to it, and it gives you kind
hmm,
of like high comedy and low comedy. And I think this is one of those films in Anomalisa that also abides by that rule, because as silly and ridiculous as certain elements are, it also is about just like the the horrors of being alone and seeking seeking fulfillment in others, because that is a fading fulfillment. It's just one of those films that the more I've thought about it, the more I've grown to love it. And even though I didn't love it on my first watch of it, it is absolutely one of my favorite animated films now.
Yeah, I went down a Charlie Kaufman binge after I saw Synecdoche, I think 2 or 3 years ago, and I've been a fan of his since. He doesn't do much directing, but when he does, it's always something great. That you said you enjoyed it more on the rewatch. I feel like that's with all of his films. They
Hmm.
work so well when you see them a second or a third time. Now we are ending it off with a not feature length film, but a short film. It's
Yeah.
I think also been mentioned here before. It's not a first time appearance for animation, so
Cool.
it's a beloved short story from Don Hertzfeldt. We're talking about the first of the at the moment 3-parter series of World of Tomorrow.
Absolutely. And all three are really special, although if I have to single out one, that first one is just so gorgeous and amazing. I maybe blew my anecdote about high-minded comedy and low-minded comedy a little too early, because this is really a short that epitomizes that, in that
Yeah.
it you're introduced to this little girl who's just kind of running around, making funny noises, playing with her toys, and all of a sudden this time traveler emerges who is future Emily, who's come
Mhm.
to deliver a very important message. We've seen that setup before.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, present Emily is a way too young to receive this message. She would rather show her toy cars off, and just the kind of ridiculous marriage of this child who is unable to even begin to comprehend what she's being shown and what she's being
Mhm.
introduced to. It's just going like way over her head. And this future time traveler clone who is trying to impart knowledge of many lives lived and lost, and peer into a future that has left humanity with more problems than they once had. Just that balance of elements is so funny and tragic to me simultaneously. I think there's just something so beautiful in the things that it's trying to communicate about what ultimately leads to a life well led, and
Mhm.
also just the sort of tragicomic nature of communicating that to someone who is just completely unready to receive the message. We all think about like,
Yeah.
what would I do if I could go back to my younger self, and I feel like this film is definitively answering, like, it doesn't matter, your younger self wouldn't be ready for it anyway. I think it's such a great film. I try to watch it at least once a year, if not more, just whenever I'm kind of like
Mhm.
in a rut. Uh, Actually, my move when I still had a Facebook was just to get sad and change my banner picture to a different still from one of these movies. But yeah,
Yeah.
I love it. I love also the marriage. We haven't talked much because I'm not very artistically talented. We haven't talked much about the quality of animation in the films that we've been
Mhm.
speaking about so far. But I think
Yeah,
this
on a
is
very
also
emotional level, yeah.
right, right. And that's how I tend
For
to
you.
approach these films. But I also am a
Mhm.
huge fan of just how this film looks, because while the Emilys are represented with these pretty crude stick figure-ish drawings, the backgrounds and the worlds that they're traveling through are these like gorgeous like color splashes and odd
Mhm.
geometric shapes and stuff like that. And it is again this different like clashing of forms that gives it this um odd tone and sense. And I think it all just coalesces into something that's very, very existential and
Mhm.
meditative, and all my favorite qualities of a film like these.
Yeah, it completely just is able to blossom in the
Hmm.
artistic style that was chosen for this. Really, I mean, you selected it as a profile picture every few months, which fair enough. There's a lot
Yeah,
of like great stills in here that you could use for that.
totally.
But yeah, I think that brings us to the end of your list, unfortunately, already.
Yeah.
Hope some people got some recommendations of some stuff they might get to check out. Also, make sure to drop your lists down in the comments below. Let us know what you'll be watching from Zach's lists and what your own lists would be. You can also find a bunch of episodes of Full Favorites all throughout December on this channel. So for that, don't forget to subscribe and leave a like here on the video as well. Goes a long way and we really appreciate it. Now, Zach, if people want to find more from you, where can they find you?
I'm talking about movies every week on the Intercut podcast at Intercut Pod on YouTube and across social media.
Zach, thank you so much for coming on. Looking forward to having you back for the future rendition of Full Favorites again.
Anytime.